Wow. Incredible.
The bright lights.
Absolutely incredible. We've got quite a panel for y'all today to discuss the making of Wings Over Water. DU was born on the wings of what created that Dust Bowl in 1937. Nick Wiley, Chief Operating Officer for Ducks Unlimited. Max McGraw was an entrepreneur. Many of you have heard of the Toastmaster. Many generations toasted their toast with the Toastmaster. It made perfect toast and was just one of his creations. The McGraw Wildlife Foundation's mission: secure the future of hunting, fishing, and land management through programs of science, education, demonstration, and communication. Introduce Charles Potter, President and CEO of the Max McGraw Wildlife Foundation. The National Audubon Society. Its purpose: conservation of birds, other wildlife, and healthy ecosystems. Some of you may not know that John James Audubon left this city that we're in right now, New Orleans, headed up the Mississippi River in the summer of 1821, 202 years ago. He was headed for St. Francisville, Louisiana, and he left quite a footprint there in the short time that he was there, a place that you should put on your bucket list. Marshall Johnson serves as Audubon's Chief Conservation Officer. Marshall. As a result of the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, President Roosevelt recommended the Standard State Soil Conservation Districts Act. This act gave states a blueprint. The first district was Brown Creek Soil and Water Conservation District, established in North Carolina on August the 4th, 1937. Arkansas was the first state to enact legislation for a conservation district. By July 1st, 1945, at the time, all 48 states had passed such legislation. Michael Crowder is our president, National Association of Conservation Districts. Michael, glad to have you. Try to get this started with Nick from DU and from Marshall from Audubon. Let's talk about getting this film produced. And why it's so important to Ducks Unlimited and to Audubon.
Well, thank you, Will. First, I want to say we are so honored to be here, to be a sponsor of this conference, to be partners with all of you through NACD and the conservation districts. And it is remarkable that we were formed kind of at the same time in history together, and we're so close and we partner together. This film, telling the stories of the prairies and the importance of the prairie potholes and what we call the breeding grounds or the duck factory. I mean, how could DU not be in love with this idea? And I've not seen a better way to tell the story of the importance of this landscape. And I think you guys might agree with this. We are telling the story, and I love the opportunity to work with all of you to help continue to tell this story. So thank you.
Telling this story is so important because it gives us the opportunity to love all of this. How many of us would have the opportunity to be in some of those places to see some of the shots that were gotten by these producers? Absolutely incredible. And all this goes on every day of our lives, and we're oblivious to it, but it's necessary. And the water is so important to our health. The health of the prairie region is vital to our own existence. Let's talk about the science. Michael, I'm going to throw this one to you. To protect and conserve the prairie pothole region, how important is the science to protect the prairie pothole regions?
Well, as Chief Cosby said earlier today, the organization is about the science. We are about the science of that, and I'm a wetland nerd myself. I love them, but on my ranch, we use grazing as a component to manage our wildlife habitat and our wetland habitat and our upland habitat. We have lots of producers out here that use that science. They were talking about the the bison in the picture. Well, we use cattle for that to mimic that. And it's highly managed. It's rotational grazing, and it's the science behind that. It's the science behind the wetlands and making sure that those clean up our water resources, and it's just a wonderful thing to have.
We're going to have a microphone set up, I think, back here for questions that y'all might want to have. So if anybody has a question, just step over to the mic and we'll recognize you and join in. Charles, there's a lot of land in the United States that's privately held. What's the importance of ranchers and farmers in this whole scheme of things?
Well, before I answer that, I have to say two things. You saw this film in a screen and theater here. Go see it in IMAX when the room is completely black and the owl comes off the tree and it heads for that hen mallard. You won't be sitting in your chairs as you were. I was watching. You're all looking at this. No, you are headed for cover because the talons come out at you. So
it's actually 3D, right?
it's 3D. So go and see it in IMAX if you can. The other thing I need to say quickly is Ducks Unlimited and Audubon, they made this possible. This is a partnership between McGraw, Ducks Unlimited, and Audubon, but DU and Audubon, two of the largest membership organizations in the world. They've spent their entire life working in this landscape. So I want to thank you, Nick. Thank you, Marshall. DU and Audubon have made this happen. As this goes around the country, they're telling a story not only to their members, but way beyond. So the importance of the landscape, I believe 98% of the prairies are privately owned. Nick will correct me if I'm wrong. Most of the work, because of the way we operate, has been done on government land. Through the efforts of DU and Audubon and your efforts, now the private landowners being recognized for what they are. So I would offer that what this film hopefully does is awaken a continent to the incredible importance of the prairies. I mentioned earlier in my remarks, we all know about the Everglades. No disrespect, if the Everglades went away tomorrow, people in South Florida would know the difference, the rest of us would not. If the prairies go away, every human being in North America is going to see a silent spring.
Amen.
So it's critical, and it's private landowners, and it's working with agriculture that's the answer.
Marshall, how can we take this message of this film forward and make a difference for the future of the prairie potholes? How can we get it out there? What do we need to do to help spread this word?
Well, first and foremost, if I had known that I was going to be on the big screen, I'd have lost some weight. It was COVID. Give me a break. I grew up in East Texas and spent my life mostly in East Texas, Dallas, and Houston, and spent a little bit of time in Southern California as luck or whatever else would have it. And what I would say to you, the purpose of this film and the magic of this film, I moved to Fargo, North Dakota, where I've lived for the past 14 years, for all of the reasons that make this landscape vulnerable. Not a lot of people. It's cold. And I like that situation not being congested, but it also means that this special bird nursery, this place that we are all connected to through our food, through birds, through all manner of elements, not a lot of people know about it. And the brilliance of this film is that people can know about it. It really, they say there's no substitution for having your boots on the ground, for being there, and that's absolutely true. Every time I see that sandhill crane at the end taking off in snow, I get a little teary-eyed, because that, for us that live in this landscape, that's a passage of time. Summer was just a few weeks before that, and now you're going into the long, hard winter, and so people don't get to see that, don't get to experience that. But this film does about as good a job of bringing it to life as you can imagine, and that's what we've got to do. We're doing everything we can to increase hunter participation through R3 and birding, But when I walk into a classical conservation rooms, there are a lot of people that probably won't be around 20 or 30 years from now. We've got to reach young people, whether they're black, brown, you name it, because that's what America looks like and will look like. And we've got to reach these folks and make sure that they know the connection between their food and the land and wildlife. And I think this film does a real good job of making that connection and, more than anything, bringing it to life.
Yes, sir.
So Nick, I might add that you and I are both duck hunters. You're COO of Ducks Unlimited. I'm president for NACD. It's not just duck hunters that benefit from these prairie pothole wetlands. And it's all birders. And one thing that I would say to our folks is, and to NRCS that are listening, that's the importance of this locally led, voluntary, incentive-based conservation model, because some of the wetland protections are likely going to be rolled back soon. And that's why we have to incentivize landowners on a voluntary basis to protect those, either put them in easements, do equip, CSP, whatever it takes to get those areas conserved. And we're standing as a partner with Ducks Unlimited and a lot of other groups to make sure this type of habitat is protected.
Absolutely. That what you do on the ground in these local communities, in your districts, is so vital. You've heard it, but from our perspective, we try to bring partners and funding to the table to help you, but you are where it's happening. And this voluntary incentive-based conservation is absolutely the best approach, the best solution, bar none. And we are all in supporting and being your partner, shoulder to shoulder, any way we can help with that. So thank you.
To talk more about what Marshall was relating to, I, for one, am here behind this podium because as a young man, I had the love of being outside and having mud between my toes and frog gigging and fishing and grew up chasing small game. And as I grew and as I got to go to different places in the United States, I began to see where the hunting was best, where the times were the best, the habitat was the best. And I began to put those two together, and that led me to conservation. And that led me to owning a piece of land and making it better. So I'm hopeful that we can get this film out to, as you said, to as many places and many people as we can, and they can see it in 3D. I want to see it in 3D. I want to see the IMAX version, because if you fall in love with something, you'll want to protect it. That's right. And that should be our number one goal.
So maybe I should just add on that. The film is actually a lost leader, and I mentioned that to Michael this morning. If you see the film, fantastic. The millions of people, particularly kids, about 70% of the people who go to IMAX theater are school kids. But the film is giving us content to go worldwide with the impressions of why we need to save the prairies. So it'll be in 4th grade classes. It'll be in 6th grade classes. You won't be seeing wings over water. You'll be seeing the warbler crossing the Gulf of Mexico in a science class. How does it do that? Where is it going? You'll see the cranes, the oldest birds today left back from the dinosaurs. What's the connection for history? So we're taking this film and we're building learning experiences in the class, real time. We're actually doing this now. So several million school children a year will be getting images of this film as part of their learning. And I guess we call it learning through nature, Will. But it's a transformative ability to take a film and go to education. And working with you all to do that in the future, I think there's an enormous opportunity to really take education to the classroom using film, using visuals to do so, which we've never captured, which is why I think it's great we're getting outside of our universe and talking to 350 million Americans.
And Will, I want to say, this is the kind of vision that got this film started,
Well, that
you
leads to
mentioned
this-
at the beginning. And thank you, Charlie,
Yes.
for you and your
Yeah,
team
no doubt.
for bringing this forward.
Well, that leads to the question: how did this? What were the beginnings of making this happen? Where did that all happen? Who had the thoughts?
Do I dare say? It began with an argument. We actually had a meeting of leaders at McGraw to talk about what the future for wetlands conservation and waterfowl conservation was. And one of the individuals who's been iconic in Ducks Unlimited's organization stood up and said, we're talking to ourselves. We need to talk to the world. And Chris Dorsey, who's not here, but Chris is really the genius behind this. Chris said, if you want to talk to the world, we need to go to IMAX. We went to IMAX and we said, we want to do this movie. And IMAX said, well, we got a lot of movies we want to make. And we said, no, you don't understand. We're going to pay for it. We're going to run the whole show. We just want you to show it. And when they found out that Ducks Unlimited and Audubon were the two lead sponsors, they said, let's go. That's the genesis of the movie. Stop talking to ourselves and let's take this message to the world.
People coming together to make it happen in a partnership that wouldn't have happened otherwise. That's awesome.
And Charlie, just real quick, I would add that if you take my ranch, for example, we're mostly a WRP site. So I'm not sure where Royalene comes at night is in the audience, but she's my state conservationist. So we manage for migratory waterfowl. But we have the warblers and every other songbird, every shorebird, but we've become famous because we hold thousands and thousands of sandhill cranes, and so many that Benton County, Washington, the roads department makes me put up signs because we have so many birders that I have to say one-lane road. So if we might be managing for ducks, but you have deer and every other type of wildlife that enjoys that habitat. So that's one thing that I want to point out is Ducks Unlimited is not just doing ducks. We're doing habitat.
Yeah, without DU and Audubon, we don't have this. We don't have it.
So we've covered most of the questions that I had. And we got anybody from the audience that has something? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Michael Leff, Director of Massachusetts Association of Conservation Districts. So a bit to the east of the prairie wetlands. First, I have to say, amazing film, and I'm definitely going to be looking for it in an IMAX near me, which won't be too near me, in Western Massachusetts. But you mentioned that, and I get now the importance and the interconnectivity with the prairie wetlands habitat, all the ecosystems related to that. Where would you say, in science terms, we are on the hopefully U-curve of the loss and degradation versus are we slowing the loss and degradation, or are we actually increasing the creation? Where are we at to where we want to be? Are we going down or up?
I'd say we're catching up. We're not caught up. We're still losing a lot of wetlands at a rapid pace. It's still a serious issue, and I wouldn't say we're anywhere near ready to say we're catching up and we're in a good place. We've got to all double down on these efforts to conserve wetlands in the prairies. Marshall?
I would say the same. And again, to the point earlier, the prairie pothole region, yes, it's the duck factory, but it's a shorebird factory. It's a grassland bird factory. And the largest American white pelican colony is in central North Dakota. So it's important. It's a bird nursery across the way. DU, Fish and Wildlife Service, and so many partners have done an incredible job on the duck species, stabilizing, but still we're losing a lot. In terms of the broader suite of birds, we've got a long way to go. And the next 10 years are going to be sort of the proving grounds for whether we can save North America's songbirds. So I'd say we're a little bit further behind than we are on the wetlands and the ducks for shorebirds and grassland birds. There's no bird species that has lost more of its population since 1970 than grassland birds. So.
And if I may, this drought in the prairies over the past 2 to 3 years, fortunately, it seems to have broken. But that is what shows the stress on the system. And you really see production drop dramatically during a drought. And it shows we still got a lot of work to do to make sure we're resilient with breeding populations of all birds.
Any more questions?
Quick thing, the film is showing in Boston, Mass. So
It is, at the aquarium.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Darrell Donahue from Southeast Kansas, here with the Kansas Association, and I am in the tallgrass prairie of Southeast Kansas. Would you please consider doing a part 2 to bring attention to more of our native grasslands because of our songbirds, our upland quail, our turkey, and our prairie chickens. Additionally, we have a lot of people coming in because we live in an area where land is cheaper and it's being bought up for the purpose of recreation, and prescribed fire is leaving the land, livestock hoof action is leaving the land, and it's growing up into brush and cedar trees. Please consider doing part 2 or a next step to help bring awareness, because I am so tired of hearing it's just grass and we're going to plant it to corn. Thank you.
All right, Charlie, you got your,
Well,
you got your wish
That's-
there.
I don't know if that was a curveball or a softball, but I'll respond this way. Wings was, we created Wings Over Water not knowing where we would go. We now find that we have opened doors to all kinds of ideas. There'll be a film made to IMAX. It's been announced recently by the governor of Utah. Ducks Unlimited is a partner in it. Audubon will be involved in it, called Secrets of Great Salt Lake. There'll be other films coming. So the whole idea is to create a network of content that we can take to the world for education. So we will not forget about the tall grass prairie, the short grass prairie of Kansas. But I think you're going to find that there's a whole opportunity here to create a suite of communications vehicles which educates everyone in America about why we think this is important. So we'll do it.
I think time's up.
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead.
It's hard to see. Are we getting? We're getting the red sign here. So, but I see a lot of people that have
time for another
questions.
question? All right, we got time for another question.
Good afternoon. I'm Albert Roberts, Okanagan Conservation District, Washington. I originally grew up on a farm in Devil's Lake, North Dakota, and I can remember the flocks of geese, swans, cranes going by and creating shadows on the ground for weeks at a time. This was about the time that they started to ditch the ponds and things like that. And by the time I left, those flocks were diminished greatly. But one of the things I'd like to mention is that as farmers who are owners of and stewards of that land, when your gross revenues are 20% under the cost of production, and the rest of the people in the world, and especially in America, don't pay their price for the food that we grow, if you could please, along with where our food comes from, put the message out that we need to be paid for what we do and to keep and preserve our lands open for production and for wildlife. Thank you.
I think that's all part of the puzzle. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, just briefly, Jerry Thornsberry from the great state of Iowa. As you all know, we're in the middle of negotiating and influencing Congress on the Farm Bill. And there's opportunities and you're opening doors. Why don't we show this in Congress so that they understand not only the value of agriculture, but conservation as well. Thank you.
Great suggestion.
Yeah,
You guys
well,
don't
Charlie, we are, great point, and we are actually working to schedule a number of screenings in Washington, D.C. at the right time to get those people that matter and those people that influence the Farm Bill. So excellent point, and it's on the radar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank y'all so much for those questions. We've run out of time. I'm going to bring Michael back up to dismiss us. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.